Thank you, Alexia and Katya. It's really important for us to make this space as accessible as possible. We're going to continue to do that through the next few virtual gatherings. We're also, for the first time and going forward, providing in real time captioning, which is what you'll see at the bottom of the screen. I also want to share a couple words from the Disability Project founder housed at TLC, Sebastian Margaret. This call is the one of many calls that we've had in the past, centering different marginalized communities that are particularly impacted by the effects of COVID-19. And it also highlights some of the wisdom and solutions that are being spearheaded by those very communities. We've also had a virtual vigil in the past. You can find all of the past recordings of our virtual gatherings on our website, and we'll also post it in the comment section. And so this call in particular places disability justice as a central value and politic of trans liberation. Disability justice holds access as a necessary practice for disrupting isolation and ensuring the participation and leadership of disabled folks. Access is meaningful when it includes a commitment to the radical, deeply transformative demands of disability justice. Disability justice charges us to identify, interrupt, and disrupt all forms of supremacy, including ableism, anti-Black racism, misogyny, fatphobia, classism, and more. By committing to building accessible spaces, we're implementing a commitment to have critical conversations together. So my name is Swai Pham. I am the digital media coordinator of Transgender Law Center, and I'll be moderating this call today. We have two folks from the advisory board of the Disability Project housed at TLC. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves now. Syrus, would you like to go first?
Hi, yes, I'm Syrus Marcus Ware. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an artist, an activist, just finishing a PhD, and I'm so happy to join you today.
So happy to have you, Syrus. And Eli?
This is Eli Clare. I am an artist and activist and writer. Long time white anti-racist, disability, justice, multi-issue, rebel rouser.
So I'm super excited for this call. I know that it's going to be really juicy. And I also know that there's been a lot of tension and intense emotions that are involved when we talk about disability justice, disabled communities, especially trans disabled folks. So I really want to make room for all of those contradictions and tensions and difficult feelings. So I encourage both of you to speak freely and express yourself as you feel is necessary. I just want to start off and ask how you're doing today, what space you're in, what headspace you're in today. Syrus, how are you feeling?
Thanks so much for asking. Today I'm well. I suppose I'm like vacillating wildly between two states, one being fine and relatively productive, and the other being sleeping most of the day. So for me, I'm somebody who, I'm mad, I'm disabled, I have 2 autoimmune diseases, and I'm also I've been in the psychiatric system for 20 years, so napping during the day is not unusual, but now it feels like a serious nap. It's like a really intense nap that it must happen. So I'm kind of going back and forth between two states of productivity. And yeah, today is an okay day. I live in Sacramento in the north part of Turtle Island, and it's quite cold here today. There was snow in some parts of Toronto. So I'm happy to be inside and be warm, and yes.
Yeah, we all have our sort of coping mechanisms at this time, and a serious nap um, sounds very needed. I might take one later today. I I want to also give Eli a chance to talk about how you're feeling, Eli.
I am okay today. Like Syrus, I find myself swinging widely between different emotions. Sometimes I'm okay. Sometimes I'm full of anxiety. Sometimes I'm heartbroken and full of grief. I know that many of us here in the States are dealing with the loss of a really important autistic queer artist, activist, writer, Mel Bags, who was very important and died over the weekend under conditions none of us are clear about. So heartbroken and grief-filled is one of my states of being. And I'm coming to this call from Burlington, Vermont, from occupied Abenaki territory, and it's early spring here, which is lovely.
Let's definitely have a moment of silence for the folks that we know and the folks that we have yet to know who we're losing in this time. Uh, I also want to, before we move forward, remind folks that this is live. So if you have any emotions of your own, feelings, if you have comments, questions for us, we'll have some time for Q&A later on. You can just throw those in the comments, and we'll be monitoring those for later. I see a couple other folks who are in our community are joining. Um, so thanks for sharing how you're doing today. Um, I know that one thing that's been on folks' mind is that the coronavirus has exposed what's already existed, which is rampant ableism all across every sector of society. And while disabled communities have been dealing with that ableism since forever, folks who are non-disabled are only recently having to grapple with some of the ways that spaces are inaccessible and having to grapple with slowing down. So I'm curious, Eli, you spoke about this a little bit, but I'm curious for the both of you, what you're noticing in your communities. How is the coronavirus impacting folks who are in your life and in your communities? Eli, you spoke a bit about it already. Do you want to expand a bit on that?
Hi, I'm so sorry to interrupt. This is your tech person. I just want to add that there's a lag between the captioning being shown on Facebook and what we're able to see on our Zoom. So what I'm going to do is end this live and then switch to screen sharing, which should hopefully make it so that people are more able to see the captions. So bear with us. We will be back on shortly.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for your patience. One of the things that we're adjusting to is that digital spaces are also have the potential for technical difficulties. So we had to end the last live in order to make sure that the live captioning was not lagged, so that we can maintain the accessibility of the space. So if you have friends who are looking for the new link, please send them this live. I was about to just hand the mic over to Syrus. I'm curious, Syrus, what you're noticing in terms of how disabled communities in your life are being impacted by the coronavirus.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I just would say, that Black, deaf, disabled, and mad people we are incredible. We have survived so much. We have fought back against systemic violence and systemic oppression, and we've built these vast communities that are rooted in love and in justice. And those bonds that we've built amongst ourselves and those strengths within our communities are being put to the test right now, absolutely amid COVID-19. While we are inside, targeted policing of Black communities continues and in fact is rampant. So what we've seen a lot, as I say, I'm based here in the north part of Turtle Island, and there's a lot of targeted policing, in particular of Black mad people, and often with fatal results. And just a couple of days ago, a week and a half ago, a young Black mad person named DeAndre Campbell was killed by the Toronto police, or the Peel police. In Winnipeg, just west of where I am, a young Indigenous woman named Aisha Hudson was killed by the police. There's murderous intent in the policing system, and that continues while we shelter in place. So all of the sort of policies and procedures being put in place now of having the police roaming the streets to make sure that we're all social distancing, or to make sure that we're all physical distancing, is actually going to is already detrimentally affecting Black and Indigenous communities who are always already the targets of the police. That's who they're looking for when they're going and doing street searches, is stop and question process, is just the carding program and stuff, which is something that the Toronto Police has been widely criticized for. Their decidedly anti-Black carding program, where they can stop you at any point and ask for your information, even if you're not doing anything. Well, that's basically what's happening right now outside while we are all inside. And then at the same time, we're seeing reports of dramatic things, like Black people being handcuffed while they're actually doing support work for folks on the street dealing with COVID-19. So there was a Black doctor, Dr. Armin Henderson, who was handcuffed while administering COVID-19 tests to folks who were houseless and street involved, and he was stopped, arrested, and handcuffed. So definitely what we're seeing is that Blackness is still under attack. Indigeneity is still under attack. Black and Indigenous, mad, deaf, and disabled folks continue to be under attack in this moment. And then, of course, there's just sort of the generalized ableism of the pandemic, the choosing of who gets what services. We've seen sort of a century and a half of the current medical industrial complex. It's woefully misogynist and ableist and anti-Black and anti-Indigenous medical care that has shaped itself into the system that we have today. Here in Sacramento, where we have socialized healthcare. In the States, you have privatized healthcare. Regardless, the medical industrial complex is set up in a particular way. There are huge issues with it, and some of the violences, the racism, the ableism that's built into the very foundation of that complex, it is being put to the test right now as you see them make decisions that are rooted in eugenics about who gets to survive this and who doesn't. But at the same time, my communities are rejoicing and thriving because we're seeing this as a moment for dreaming big. This is a possibility where we actually might come out of this pandemic with a completely different world. We are planting new seeds to grow a forest that will look completely different when we come out of this than the current late-stage race capitalist system that we're living in right now. So these are revolutionary times. There is the possibility that we could dramatically change the world in 18 months. And so looking at some of the things, I'm an abolitionist. I've been doing prison abolition for 25 years. And I never thought I would see the days where they would just start opening the doors. We always said it was as simple as just opening the doors and, of course, putting supports in place for people when they get out, but literally just open the doors. And that's what we're seeing now, the sort of rapid decarceration around the world as prisons are being emptied because of COVID-19. And sort of seeing other things like that start to manifest, the idea of a universal basic income being spread around in so many different places. All of these possibilities that we were dreaming about, that we were trying to prefigure in our politics, are now coming to be potentials. So we, I think, are also, I'm in my communities, we're sort of rejoicing as well, because we're seeing the possibility for some widespread social change that just might result in all of us having the right to self-determination and all of us getting to be free and us finally overthrowing capitalism and destroying the medicalized ableism that comes with it. So I'm both disheartened by looking at the targeted policing, but also perhaps hopeful because of what might come of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Syrus. It makes me think a lot about the ways that some folks have, documented forms of violence, and disabled communities have so long been targets of violence disproportionately without reports of it or without media coverage. So I think folks should keep that in mind, right? I also want to remind all of us, since the live has restarted, that we should be speaking a little slower in order for interpretation in Spanish and ASL and the live captioning to be done so that the spaces continues to be accessible and accurate for folks who are on different phone lines. Eli, I'd love to hear from you what you're experiencing and what your communities are experiencing from COVID-19.
Thank you, Syrus, for all of that, and particularly your sense that this could easily be a revolutionary moment, that will come out of this with a different, more just world where people are experiencing liberation. For me, this feels, and to a lot of us in both my disability communities and in the queer and trans communities I'm in, this both feels like a really new moment with a lot of potential, and also a very old moment for us, and an old moment in terms of being considered disposable and burdensome in the ways, Syrus, that you named really clearly and well. And when I talk about disposable and burdensome, I'm thinking of disabled, sick, mad, deaf, and neurodivergent folks. I'm thinking of elderly folks. I'm thinking of fat people. I'm thinking of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. I'm thinking of poor people. I'm thinking of immigrants. And thinking of everyone who's living in lockup in various kinds of institutions, prisons, detention centers, psych facilities, group homes, nursing homes, thinking of transgender and conforming folks, the living under conditions where we're seen as disposable and burdensome is so friggin' familiar. And it feels so much like we're dealing with two risks. One of those risks is a viral risk, and we're in the mainstream media and consuming. There's so much talk about how we're all in this together and the virus doesn't discriminate. And one of the risks is this viral risk. There's a second risk, though, that is systemic and institutional and is targets various marginalized communities. And that aren't even, that there's so much disparity, I'm thinking of the healthcare disparities that Black people are experiencing right now. So it feels like a very old moment to this, and yet it's also this brand new moment of slowing everything down, of non-disabled people becoming more aware of the importance of accessibility, and particularly remote accessibility. It's a moment where many people are beginning to get a glimpse of what physically distancing and social isolation feels like, which is something that a lot of disabled and sick and mad and deaf and neurodivergent people know all too well. I think it's also a time where the scrappy survival skills that many of us have are skills that everyone needs and everyone is beginning to pay attention to. And thinking of the tremendous value of interdependence in the disability community, and also the tremendous knowledge of how to live in deep isolation. I'm thinking about the value placed on access, and I'm thinking of all the creative problem solving that disabled and sick people possess, of just making do and figuring it out and being really creative problem solvers. Those skills and knowledge and experiences are things that the non-disabled world needs, that the non-disabled queer and trans community needs. Rather than being disposable, disabled people need to be known as essential. We have always been essential, and we are essential in this moment, and we are essential for whatever is to come after this moment.
Thank you, Eli. Everything you're saying is so important. Everything that both of you are saying is speaking to the folks have said the word despair, but it just gives me pause because of the profound unfairness of it all, that so many non-disabled people only have to reckon now with some of the struggles that disabled folks have been experiencing, but also trying to heal from and demanding better, demanding justice, demanding better treatment for so long to no avail. And I want to make some space for some of those maybe frustrations, tensions, some of the, I'd love to hear some of the ways that, all the ways that the coronavirus is impacting your communities is making you feel and is making your people feel. Syrus, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, as you say, all of these things that we know, right? We know that we've asked to be able to Zoom into conferences and been told, no, it's too complicated. You know, we know that we've asked, is it possible for me to do part of my job from home because of chronic pain or because of whatever, and it's hard to come in? And we've been told no, it would be too difficult. So we know that there are all of these so-called accommodations that we were told were not possible to try to figure out when disabled people were asking for them, and now, of course, everyone is surprisingly figuring them out quite quickly. So we know that, and that's been something that a lot of disabled, mad, sick folks have been writing about online. There's been brilliant thinking on this. People have been writing about that for the last 3 weeks. How is it that just now you're suddenly able to figure out that I could do the keynote from Zoom, actually? So I think that there's a lot of, rightfully so, a lot of frustrated folks who it just shows what's considered valuable and who's considered important. I really think that in my communities we're feeling, I think that there's a way that one of the things that I found very frustrating is that for those of us who experience autoimmune issues and two autoimmune diseases, we had to start taking this very seriously very quickly. So when they started first saying, hey, there's this virus, hey, you need to be careful, we were already shutting the doors and staying in. And watching non-disabled folks continue to travel, continue to plan events, continue to gather in groups was such a slap in the face, because it was basically saying, we don't really care what happens to you, for those of us who are already shut in. And so sort of, hearing people be frustrated now that they've been inside for maybe 13 days, some of us have been inside for 30 days or for 45 days. Some of us have always been inside because we live our lives in our beds and in our rooms and in our homes. So, it's been quite frustrating. As I say, I'm so conflicted about all of it. So even as I say, I'm like celebrating prison abolition and celebrating that folks are now opening the doors and letting folks out, but they're only doing it because they're, in some cases, because they're concerned about their own survival. It's not about the lives of prisoners. It's not about the fact that prisons are wrong, but morally, putting people in cages is a terrible idea. They're doing it because they themselves don't want to get the virus from a prisoner or ex-prisoner. So, this is a moment when we're seeing people at their most sort of self-interested, and that can lead to a lot of feelings of frustration and a lot of feelings of hurt. But, having said that, I encourage everyone to check out some of the great writing that's been done around this, because people are letting their feelings out, and I think that the message is starting to be heard, which is good.
Thank you, Syrus. I just want to pause for a second to ensure that our captioning is being reflected on Facebook. So if folks could just give us a minute, the TLC team is going to ensure that it's being reflected. I'm seeing in some of the comments that there's folks who can't see it.
And yes, I can definitely talk more slowly.
Thank you, Syrus. Okay, I just want to remind folks that there's a possibility that you have captions turned off. I'm seeing that for most folks it's appearing, so I'm going to continue. I just also want to reassure everyone that there will be a transcript available after this call, and it's being recorded. Thank you for your patience. Eli, I know you spoke a bit about the despair that you've been feeling. Do you want to speak more on how the situation is making you feel and how you're witnessing other folks feeling?
I think that a lot of what's happening for folks around me and for me is fear, as well as rage. That the medical rationing that's happening, as I talk of triage that will screen disabled people out of emergency and urgent care if our lives are deemed worth saving. That is both enraging and terrifying. I know a dozen people who use ventilators every day who are preparing to do urgent and emergency care at home right now because I know that if they went to an emergency room, they would be turned away, or their ventilators might be confiscated. And so it's terrifying and enraging time that way. So many of us in the disability community, in fact, communities, in BIPOC communities, are talking about seeing eugenics really clearly. Eugenics has become very clear again. It's never gone away, but it's very clear right now. There's this powerful hashtag #NoICU eugenics. But there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of rage. And there's also some little piece of hope that some of what's being learned about by access right now isn't going to go away. But none of us are talking about if once the stay-at-home orders are lifted and non-disabled people go back to their regular lives. Don't you dare forget these lessons. Don't you dare abandon us. Don't you dare forget don't shut us out. Remember the value of remote events. Remember the value of gathering in public when we can gather in public. One of the things about being queer and or trans and disabled is that so many of us who are queer, trans, disabled people do not have access to public queer and trans spaces. Queer and trans people have fought for so long to have public space, and because of lack of access, disabled and sick people often don't have access to those public spaces, and we're saying in these conversations, whatever comes after this moment in the pandemic, let's use it to create more space to make our public queer and trans spaces actually accessible to all of us.
Can I add on to what you're saying, Eli?
Yes, of course.
And to say, and in addition to making sure that those public spaces are accessible, to not abandon the cherished online spaces that we've now co-created, disabled and non-disabled together. Places like Club Quarantine, places like, these online dance clubs that you can go to where, there was a Crip rave that happened online. So I DJ'd for a couple of these things, and it's so wonderful to think that the nexus, the center of the organizing, the center of the party, the center of the community is actually happening online now out of necessity So let's also say, don't you dare forget that. Because for some of us, we may never be going back outside. And so, you know, we need some of the online spaces to continue and to thrive. Now that I've gone to an online party, I never want to go to a party in real life. It's way too anxiety provoking. It's so much more fun to do it from your pajamas at home.
Yes, 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 yes. I cannot say yes enough to you, Syrus, about that.
I'm also so glad, Eli, that you mentioned queer and trans folks. I especially want to highlight, you know, trans disabled wisdom. I know that in spite of all that's been happening, trans disabled folks have been cultivating wisdom and survival strategies, ways of taking care of one another. How are folks, Eli and Syrus, how are folks displaying those? What kind of wisdom are you witnessing? And either of you can start.
I think some beautiful things. I mean, the mutual aid, there's a mutual aid and care, collective care Google Drive. We can post the link in the on the transgender law page, but where people can get access to resources on mutual aid that was created in part by Leah Lakshmi Samarathina. I can spell that out. Leah Lakshmi, PIEPZNA -SAMARASINHA. And you know, things like that are just popping up, that people are sharing their brilliance, what they've learned about how to survive in this moment. I've seen some really beautiful adaptations of things. So this pod mapping chart that Rebel Sydney Black posted, that was originally used for transformative justice work, that's now being adapted to create care webs and to understand who's in our care web and who we can turn to and who's there for us in these moments. So there's some amazing resources and support networks that are being built up and written about, importantly, written about and talked about, that people can access right now, that is really exciting.
Eli, how about you?
Let me see. I would echo Cyrus's point about mutual aid, about sharing information, about sharing medical information, about sewing masks for each other. That when I think of trans disabling wisdom, I think particularly about how both trans communities and disability communities, and then all of the voice overlap. So for trans disabled people, how we become experts at sharing medical information, about creating these non-medical avenues for distributing and disseminating medical information about what works and what doesn't, who's going to give us respectful care, who to avoid. And I see some of that communal sharing and gathering resources, including medical resources, but not exclusively medical resources, happening now in queer and trans disability spaces.
Thank you. I'm brought back to the image of what Syrus said earlier, which is that we're planting the seeds for a new forest. And it just brings me to all of the ways that trans disabled folks are dreaming and creating the knowledge that's needed for a future that is accessible to all people, and not just accessible, that's also affirming and lifts up the value of all people. So I would love to hear about some of your dreams and your visions. Syrus, you want to go first? I saw a smile.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I guess I'm an activist, and I have known that the world needed to change since I was a child. I've been fighting for a revolution since I was a child. So to me, I'm not going to let this moment pass me by. This is a moment for us to push for widespread changes for us all to get to be free. So what I'm dreaming of is I'm dreaming of a world where, as they say, the future is accessible. I'm dreaming of a world that is both online and in real life, that is accessible for all of us at different ways, even with our competing access needs and all of the things that come with being multiply disabled, deaf, mad, sick, crazy, all at the same time and in community together. I'm dreaming of a world that does not have capitalism, a world that is free, finally, from race capital, where we all have the resources that we need to survive and thrive, where food, stable housing, medical support, all of those things are given freely and on demand. I dream of a world that does not have anti-Black racism, that is not rooted in colonialism and imperialism, a world where there is an end of race-based thinking, in fact, and strong communities, BIPOC communities, who are leaders and self-determined and living their own self-determined lives. I'm imagining a world that has resolved some of the issues of climate change so that we're not living under the Anthropocene, so that the earth has what it needs to revive itself and survive, where we get rid of the sort of capitalist notions of produce, expand, and how that's destroying the world and creating a whole bunch of terrible experiences for those who are most marginalized. So I'm imagining that we come out of this much, much better off, at the very minimum of universal basic income for everybody, opening the doors to the prisons and letting people out, reforming the education system, and reforming the medical system so that we all have what we need if there ever is another crisis and something like this. So I'm very hopeful, actually. I remain hopeful that, whenever I have these moments where I remind myself that we are living in revolutionary times, that revolution is not a one-time event, that revolution is something that continues and that it's a process, I feel excited because I know that we're on the right road and we're going to get to a place where we are all finally free. And I can't wait. I feel like we are very close right now. And so I continue to dream about that every day.
That's so beautiful, Syrus. Thank you. Eli, I'm curious of your thoughts.
I don't have much to add, Syrus. What a dream. Like, what a series of dreams. I think I only want to add two thoughts. The first being that the dreamers among us are really important. I know I'm not good at dreaming, that my dreams are so about what I want to say no to rather than what needs to be said yes to. And so there's people like you who can name those proactive dreams, that feels so important to me. And the second thing I'll say is what I know I dream of is a world where disabled, sick, man, deaf, neurodivergent people, where old people, where fat people, where BIPOC folks, where poor people were immigrants, where everyone who has been locked out in various institutions, where we are seen not as a burden and not as disposable, but as absolutely and essentially essential to the world.
I absolutely share both of your dreams, and I am very confident that we will get there with both of your help. I'm very grateful for both of you for being on and sharing your wisdom today. If folks have questions, this is actually our highest attended virtual gathering. Makes total sense with all the brilliance. There have been tons of comments, so just letting you both know that so many people are sharing love. I want to invite folks in the audience to share questions, comments. We have a bit of time for that. I'm seeing a lot of people echoing Eli's thought that people like Syrus and other dreamers are very important right now. And also folks really want an online party.
Oh my gosh, can I gush about online parties for a minute?
Sure.
Now, I mean, there was an online play party, there was a crypt rave, there was an Aries dance party. Folks, this is our time. This is our time to thrive. We know how to use those, well, I kind of know how to use the technology, but we know how to do these things from home. This is our moment. So yeah, there are some great online, and all of the anxiety about getting up and leaving your home, you don't have to do that. It's wonderful. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, maybe we can make one happen in the near future. I see actually some questions now. So the first one is, well, first, someone is thankful that folks named fatphobia in this conversation. And the question from right through is, how are y'all keeping up your pleasure activism while you're quarantined? Happy face.
Well, as I mentioned, there was an online play party. So that was great. And I think, yeah, just trying to figure out the things that give us pleasure and joy. And for me, I'm an extrovert, and I love, I do actually love people. So I've been doing like online calls with people. There was a group that was very influential to me politically that I used to organize with in the early 2000s called the Prisoners Justice Action Committee. And we haven't spoken in 10 years, and we got together and had an online call and saw each other. And so just, finding ways to connect with people and bring that joy back in, it's been really lovely.
Thanks, Syrus. Eli, did you have thoughts on pleasure activism in the time of quarantine?
Oops, hang on here. For me, unlike Syrus, I'm an introvert, and I'm not always sure about humans, even though I adore community and am really fierce about community building. I'm not always sure about humans. And as someone who can still go outside with a lot of physical distancing, I am finding so much pleasure connecting with the natural world. of going down to like Champlain and just watching early spring emerge, watching the maples, but watching the rest of the planet keep going on. Reading the news about black bears and bobcat and coyotes walking all over through Yosemite National Park using roadways as wildlife corridors. Those things are giving me so much pleasure, so much solace, so much refuge as the natural world has always given me.
Thank you both. We actually have a great question from, I lost the name for a second. But the question was about how folks who are abolitionists can be convinced to end institutionalization within long-term care facilities when that is so ingrained in our society. I found the question's from Megan Linton. I know you have thoughts on that, Syrus. Do you want to share some more thoughts on abolition?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I've been doing abolition work for 25 years, and one of my critiques of the movement, what I think in general, is that there really hasn't been enough engagement with disability at all in prison abolition organizing. And so even though there have been these strong voices saying, hey, talk about psychiatric detention, hey, let's talk about long-term care facilities, hey, let's talk about, these regional institutions that people were being sent to, there wasn't really a lot of organizing within prison abolition or organizing around disability issues. So unfortunately, they're, a little bit slower sort of in catching up to our issues. I think right now in this moment of rapid decarceration, where we're seeing people being let out of prisons, there's a moment to really push for decarceration from long-term care facilities, from psychiatric detention hospitals, from places like that as well, in part because of COVID-19. But I think that what needs to happen in this phrase where you say convince abolitionists to dream of this is that we need to, I think, be infiltrating and becoming part of these abolitionist groups. And we need to change the direction because there needs to be more disability justice and disability leadership within abolition organizing. And that's something that I've been pushing for 25 years, because otherwise you have, a very sort of white, non-disabled, sort of middle class, well-meaning folks who are doing the work, but who aren't really connected to some of the issues that are behind the work. So, that's what I would say.
Can I add something to that, Syrus?
Absolutely.
This is Eli. I think part of what's important about that infiltration is that actually we're never going to achieve abolition without abolition across all the institutions that do lockdown. I'm thinking of the moment in time where psych facilities were being deinstitutionalized, and it was a moment of great unknowns and some hope and some trepidation. And what happened in that deinstitutionalization was abandoning mad people in the streets, and 25 years later, prisons are now functioning partly as the lockdown places for mad people. And so it's a really good example of how you can't advocate abolition in one kind of institution and not have other institutions become more important. That abolition has to happen across all of those lockdown institutions, I think, to create the world we're dreaming of.
Thank you both. I am gonna just hand off one more question since we're out of time, but we're gonna do our best to answer the rest of the questions offline when the live is over. But the last question is from Rebecca Lillian. What is the biggest thing folks can do from home to fight ableism during these times?
What is the biggest thing that people can do to fight ableism from home in these times? I think if you are non-disabled and you're trying to figure out how to support, you should be, and if you have the financial resources to, if you're salaried, to actually support some of these fundraisers that are going around to support folks who are, feeling the effects of having everything be canceled. Support the fundraisers for sex workers, support the fundraisers for Black folks, knowing that this is going to get to sick and disabled folks in those communities. And I think the other things that you could do is if you're somebody who experiences disability, who's deaf, who's mad, who's part of sick and disabled communities, and you want to try to address systemic ableism happening right now, we can really kind of use these moments to gather in our collective care groups to try to overthrow the system and to try to plan together how we're going to do that. If I'm being bold and I'm saying how are we going to address ableism, I think part of it has to come through widespread system change. And so we can kind of use this moment of quiet incubation to gather, to plan, to prepare. And I feel like that's something that can be really useful. So my message is sort of different to disabled and non-disabled folks. So if you're non-disabled, please, know that the revolution is going to be led by disabled folks, and know that we need your support, and we probably need, financial and emotional support now more than ever. And so please do that. And for the rest of us, let's organize together how we're going to change this thing once and for all.
Eli, would you like to add any closing thoughts? Eli, we can't hear you if you're speaking.
I'm here. I'm just fiddling with tech here. Hang on.
No worries.
So this is Eli, having had a little tech difficulty, a CP moment. I just want to say yes to Syrus. I just want to say yes to everything you said. And thank you for Syrus. I want to thank you for your brilliance, for your tenacity in doing the activism you have, for your faith in revolution, and your faith that it's coming soon. Thank you, friend.
Thank you both for being on today. So much gratitude to both of you and both of your wisdom. I know that we'll be continuing to highlight disability justice and disabled communities' wisdom. In the meantime, I hope that all of you take care, all the folks who are watching, and thank you for tuning in. We'll be having our weekly gatherings every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. So hope to see you on those as well.
Thank
Take
you
care,
so
everybody.
Much.